Yo, people, I know it's been forever. I'm gonna just get straight into things. Life's just been busy. Sorry. The story begins on a very dangerous night. You hear thunder clapping. You hear people screaming. Buildings falling like dominoes. Places collapsing within themselves. And amidst it all, you see a mother and her beautiful 4-year-old boy. This mother picks up her child and she starts running away from all this danger around them, because the last thing in the world that she'd want is for her son to be hurt. And after a decent distance, enough distance put between her and all this danger, she eventually collapses. And it's a tragic sight before Izuku's eyes, because he goes over to his mother to check on her, and he's yelling for his mother, but she's not responding, because unfortunately she has died. All this chaos and commotion, she had suffered so many wounds, several ribs broken, which ended up piercing certain organs, internal bleeding filling up her body, and unfortunately, once her adrenaline died down, there was nothing more to be done. And Izuku is just crying over his mother's body in the middle of the street. And as he cries over his mother's body, he hears the loud clapping, the sound of like that thunder. Alas, there's no rain or lightning though. And it keeps getting closer and closer, and in just panic he runs to like hide behind some rubble, and just sitting there is a rifle. And Izuku, thinking that he needs to protect this place because obviously his mother is there, he ends up picking up that gun, aiming it, and he ends up pulling the trigger. Now, by law, in this universe at least, they are forced to have the guns unloaded at all times unless it's in actual use. So, supposedly, this gun was unloaded. And the bullet then pierces through All For One's chest, giving All Might the advantage in their fight. Izuku panicking, thinking he just killed someone. He knows laws, but the mind of a child, it's straightforward. He's like, I killed somebody, I'm going to prison. Like, that's just kind of the way they work. They take it too literally. And so, in the midst of his panic, he runs away. He ends up wandering into the forest where he just collapses. He wakes up a few hours later, just continues to wander when he eventually stumbles upon a decrepit and old hunting cabin. And he enters through the front door. It wasn't even locked. There was a bed in the back corner of the cabin, and honestly, Izuku just didn't have the energy. He might have passed out for a couple hours in the middle of the forest after his adrenaline began to die down, but he needs sleep. So he goes, lies down on the bed, and he just conks out. And when he wakes up, he's crying. Like he was having a night terror. He was having such a terrible dream, just remembering the moment that his mother died right before him. And Izuku just is so unsure on how to proceed anymore. He thinks he's probably like a fugitive. He thinks that he has no one else because he's unaware if he has any more family. He only ever knew his mother. His father was dead before he was even born. He had died in a fatal car crash. And so Izuku, who felt all alone in the world, was so lost on what to do. And eventually, after a few hours, he starts feeling that rumbling in his tummy, And so he goes outdoors just to look for anything to eat. He ends up finding some berries here and there, but even he's seen like a couple of nature documentaries and some, survival shows that his mother would have on the TV. His mother loved watching Survivor and things like that. So he knew that he'd probably have to kill some animals and eat those. And so Izuku would then just proceed to continue eating berries and stuff for the next few days when he looks at the gun in the corner of that room that he's been trying his hardest to not even notice, because to him it's just a reminder of the offense of that night, that he killed someone and that his mother was gone. But eventually he realizes he has no choice. And so he picks up the gun and he goes out. And while exploring around, he comes across a little baby wolf, and it's injured, its paws hurt, and can't keep walking, getting chased by a coyote. And Izuku, looking at this poor baby cub, just picks up the rifle, aims it, and pulls the trigger. And the coyote immediately falls on the spot. And Izuku, thinking that that was a really loud bang, thinks he should just go hide. He picks up the little baby coyote and he brings it back to the cabin. After dropping it off there, he closes the door behind him as he leaves, and he goes back to where he had shot the coyote. The body's still there intact, and so, thinking about it, he realizes he's killed an animal and he still needs to start eating. So he ends up taking the coyote home, where he takes this dull blade that was in the hunting cabin and just starts skinning it. Now, he does not skin it well at all. There's still skin on parts and stuff like that, but he did take a certain part and left it for the little baby wolf. That's when Izuku, tries to start a fire, which he has a lot of trouble doing. Eventually, he gets lucky with it, and so he starts cooking the food. Now, he remembers a very big thing that his mother told him. You always have to make sure to cook your food enough, otherwise you might get a deadly disease or horrifically sick. And Izuku, fearing that, he kind of made charcoal, but it's the only thing he had, so he ate it anyway, even though it tasted horrific. And that's when he turns around to see the little baby wolf eating the meat he left next to it. And Izuku, for like the first time in days, smiles because he thinks it's cute. And after this series of events, this wolf won't leave his side. And the reason behind why the wolf won't leave Izuku's side is because he's imprinted on Izuku. The wolf hadn't been alive long, didn't really know its own parents, and that's when his parents had perished, and he was left on his own to fend for himself. He was attacked by a coyote when Izuku saved him, and so, of course, the wolf had imprinted upon him. After all these series of events, things kind of fall into a routine. Izuku starts cooking things a little better, not always having charcoal, still obviously messing up sometimes because he's a child. And after probably about 4 or 5 months of just this daily routine of living life, his wolf companion, who he's still trying to think of a name for, and him are out hunting. After this hunt, where they end up bringing back a couple of rabbits and things among that nature, he goes home and he looks inside one of the drawers. That's when he notices bullets. And that's when he comes to the realization he had not reloaded that gun, not once. So he's thinking of like why that is. Maybe it's a magic gun, but then he's like, that doesn't make sense. Things along that nature. That's when Izuku realizes that maybe, just maybe, it's a part of his quirk, the fact that there's more bullets. So Izuku, during another decently long time span of several months, begins trying to understand his quirk. Because he realizes that he's been subconsciously and instinctually, putting bullets inside of the gun. And when he does it, it's like a core reflex of him. He's not doing it consciously. He doesn't even know he's doing it most of the time. It just happens. So eventually he starts to get control of it. And he starts being able to make the bullets on command. Just putting some on the table, stuff along those lines. And during these years that are going to pass, Izuku does name his wolf companion. His wolf companion's name is Kuma, and Izuku loves Kuma. Kuma is all he currently has. Eventually, after 4 years of living in the woods, Izuku is now 8 years old. He's losing his ability to just speak regular English, even as well as he could before. Things like that. Things you gradually lose if you don't use it. And that's when eventually somebody comes into the woods spotting Izuku and his wolf, and ends up going to the police, mentioning that there's a child in the forest with a pet wolf living there. The authorities then go into the woods to find Izuku, and they take Izuku and his pet because there seems to be like a genuine bond formed between the two, and they don't know what exactly Izuku has been through, and maybe taking away his companion would cause severe psychological harm. Yes, they think things through. Crazy, I know. Anyways, continuing on with the story, my bad. They end up doing a DNA test when they realize something about Izuku. He is related to Lady Nagant, who works for the Hero Commission. And so their first order of business is calling his only living relative, and also bringing Izuku to his mother's grave so he understands where it is and where she is. It's a sense of closure they were hoping to give to him. After all that, things start to pick up a little bit. Lady Nagant takes Izuku in, along with his pet, but the Hero Commission takes notice of Izuku after learning about his quirk. Because during his time in the hospital, due to malnutrition, because he obviously wasn't perfectly healthy, and things of similar nature, they end up actually getting Dr. Luttrell in because they wish to know what Izuku's quirk is exactly. And that's when Dr. Luttrell looks at Izuku and gasps, basically. And he explains that for giving up parts of his body, he can form bullets from said parts. It seems for the time that he was gone, he most likely used hair. And that's why his bullets weren't super powerful. However, in the description of his quirk that I can see, the bullets get more and more powerful depending on what he gives up to create them. And the doctors were somewhat horrified, realizing that Izuku had been technically sacrificing parts of his body to survive like that. It genuinely made the doctors sad to see. And Lady Nagant's jaw dropped. However, since the Hero Commission found out about all this, they decided that maybe he could be a perfect assassin for them. Eventually, they begin training Izuku, teaching him how to use his quirk more proficiently, how to aim better, teaching him hand-to-hand combat, because sure, he could survive, but he wasn't winning against anybody who was properly trained to fight. However, out of the quote-unquote kindness of their heart, they allowed him to train with Lady Nagant. Lady Nagant did appreciate this favor from the Hero Commission. However, when Izuku turned 11 years old, after years of living in civilization again, going through intensive schooling, training, they, among other things, they eventually send him out on a mission to kill. Izuku is not one to kill for no reason, so they kept trying to make Izuku kill, but he kept refusing because it would go against his own morals. Eventually, they start breaking Izuku's morals, like just slowly creeping into it, and he refuses to kill, but he's begun severely injuring everybody he has to. However, after a while of doing this, for about 3 to 4 months, he becomes desensitized to injuring people, and slowly but surely, they do convince him to cross that line. Now, he still has his own set of morals. He's closer to the hero killer more than anything, but the one thing they can't convince him to do is civilians or heroes. Villains, he is willing to kill at times. And he does this at a very far distance with nothing but an iron sight on a hunting rifle. Yes, that very same hunting rifle he had in that cabin with him for all those years. And so Izuku begins completing the actual assassination requests. And once Izuku is nearing the age of 14, that's when Lady Nagant puts in a threat to the Hero Commission. Now, the Hero Commission isn't terrified, per se, of Lady Nagant, but if she became a whistleblower on everything they've been doing and informed people like the number 1 hero, the top 10 heroes even, their lives would get very, very difficult. It would be hard to maintain their status quo. And Lady Nagant told them that they are going to send Izuku to UA with no sort of mission, or else they're going to have a very rough day when all this information comes out about them. Them thinking that that's a pretty good threat, they decide to let Izuku go, because they're also hoping that this time can make him stronger. So Izuku then goes to Lady Nagant and questions, just like, why am I going to UA? And she mentions that she remembers when Izuku had confided in her that he really wanted to become a hero one day to protect people from what he had gone through when he was 4 years old. Her resonating with the way Izuku was feeling, she told Izuku that she made it her mission to get him his dream. Allow him the chance to make his own dream come true. So, yeah, do your best. She then ends up going up to her room, because she's not really the sentimental type. She loves that kid to bits, but she'll never tell him that. After a few more months, Izuku is getting ready for the UA entrance exams. He uses his rifle, and people are wondering, like, oh, why is he using a rifle? There aren't supposed to be any support items, blah, blah, blah. And that's when the teachers actually mention that it's a part of his quirk, basically. Without the rifle, his quirk literally does not work. So Izuku then takes his rifle, gets up on a high vantage point outside of the gate, and that's when President Mike says, go, go, go. But Izuku, he's not wasting any time. Before any of the students can even react, he starts shooting. Down 1, down 2, down 3, robot after robot dropping, and he's reloading fast. He just has to pull back the bolt. He just continues pulling it back, shooting. And after a certain amount he drops, he just picks up his gun and just sits down on top of the roof while he eats. That's when all the heroes, they're just sitting there, jaw dropped. They're questioning, like, how is he so proficient with this gun? What exactly is his quirk? Who is this kid? Things along these lines. They just are discussing with each other. Izuku obviously has certain bullets made just in case he ever ends up needing to use them. And he always keeps them on him. So Eraserhead is thinking, like, maybe he could stop Izuku by using his quirk, but he wouldn't be able to stop Izuku. He'd only be able to slow him down. Izuku is on that timing. So eventually the exams are concluded, and that's when Nezu, All Might, and Aizawa meet Izuku on top of the high vantage point he had gotten on outside of the gates, and they're like, what exactly is your quirk, young man? Izuku explains to them that basically he sacrifices parts of his body for bullets. And they're kind of horrified. He's just like, listen. It's not like I'm sacrificing like limbs or nothing. Strands of hair count. So I cut my hair regularly, and I can just use that to trade in for bullets. Or I can just use hair on my head. However, the more I give up, or the more important the part of my body I give up, the stronger the bullets will become. And they're kind of like both horrified and fascinated by such a quirk. So they end up continuing on with the exams, completing the other ones. Izuku gets told he passes on the spot by Nezu and All Might and Aizawa. Aizawa is really interested in Izuku because he thinks Izuku could be like a nighttime hero, much like himself. Izuku then goes home. Lady Nagant isn't there, so he assumes she's on a mission, and he just relaxes. And his life is very mundane for the next couple weeks. No assassination requests, no news from UA. He just spends the next couple of weeks hanging out with his boy, Kuma. Eventually, the first day of UA comes along. Izuku arrives at school and he pulls up in his own casual but nice clean fit. And the first thing he does is go straight for the principal's office and asks, Principal Nezu, can I bring Kuma with me? Like, I'd really like to have my dog around. And Nezu's just like, I'm sorry, Izuku, but I can't allow you to have a wolf on the premises. But Izuku tries to argue, but it doesn't end up working. Nezu stands his ground. But he does explain to Izuku that if he really wants, on days with like certain training exercises, he could bring his wolf. And Izuku accepts that as like the only compromise he's really gonna get. And then he goes to class. Once in class, he sits down, and the entire class is just kind of staring at him. Because they're just confused, but like also in awe of Izuku after the entrance exams. And Aizawa comes in and things remain fairly canonical. They go out for the quirk apprehension test. Izuku gets like middle of the bar because he is just a normal person. And yeah, so that's how the quirk apprehension test goes. Nobody gets expelled. And so the school day comes to an end, and Uraraka is kind of fascinated about Izuku because even though she had to be saved in the entrance exams, she still got into the class. She still got enough points. But she thought Izuku was a really cool person. And Ida was kind of fascinated by Izuku as well, so they approach Izuku at the end of the school day, asking to hang out with him, so they can get to know each other a little better. And Izuku has never really had friends. He never had school. This is like his first schooling time, like going to actual high school. And so he goes and hangs out with them. They're at a little cafe just talking about life, things like that. things among that nature, of course. When they get to how did you grow up, Izuku is unsure on how to answer this question because, unlike Ida and Uraraka, he didn't really have a family. Obviously, he had Lady Nagant, but that was only after he turned 8 years old. Most of his childhood, he was in the forest. So he's contemplating telling them the truth or trying to come up with a lie when he asks Ida and Uraraka to go first because he's not sure how to explain what his childhood was like. And of course they agree. Ida's just like, yeah, I'm in a hero family. My big brother is currently the hero Ingenium. And Izuku's like, wow, that's so cool. And Uraraka's just like, my family's just a bunch of construction company owners and stuff like that, but we're not rich or anything. And that's actually why I want to become a hero, so I can make money and help them out. Izuku is just like, that's very understandable, honestly. And Uraraka questions herself. She's like, why did I tell him that? And Izuku is just like, I guess I'll go. I grew up in a forest. And they're like, what? A forest? What do you mean? Izuku kinda stays on the vague about it, but he explains that when he was 4 years old, he ended up getting lost in the woods and he just ended up being there for a couple of years. And they were kind of just shocked. They're like, how did you survive? That's when he explains that that's actually when he realized his quirk had awakened. Because his quirk is actually making bullets. He can make bullets out of parts of his body. And they're kind of like, not really disgusted, just shocked. But they let it go after that, and he explains that though that was his like early formative years, when he was 8, he ended up getting adopted by his cousin, who's an adult, with a similar quirk. And so things continue on. And after all their conversating, they all decide to go home. And that's when we go to the next day of UA. Things aren't really crazy in the morning, of course, until the heroes versus villains with All Might. They all draw lots. It's Izuku and Uraraka versus Bakugo and Ida once again. And Izuku decides he will not use the bullets that he makes, but he'll just use some rubber bullets, so he doesn't actually injure anybody. So Izuku's idea is that he will go up onto a roof nearby to get a vantage point through the windows. It seems most of the rooms have windows, and so he will try and figure out where the bomb is like that. Uraraka will play off the way Izuku is working, and Izuku is thinking perhaps that he will get Uraraka to float him up to a certain height so he can get the perfect shot. Things like that to reposition himself, really. With the repositioning, he can get Uraraka to put him at a perfect vantage point for his shots. He plans on avoiding Bakugo because he realizes Bakugo seems like quite a hothead, so Bakugo will probably go on ahead to try and get rid of us before we can get to the bomb. However, if we're not even in the building, he won't have an easy time finding us. So the time begins. Izuku goes up on the roof right in front of the building, starts looking through the windows with his rifle. That's when Izuku spots it, the bomb. But he doesn't have the best vantage point, but it'll work for what he needs to do because he's going against Ida, right? So what he does is he takes aim, of course. He snipes Ida's legs several times, leaving pretty significant bruising that Ida can't just continue running. And Izuku then just gets Uraraka to float them up to the window where he breaks it with the back of his rifle and they go in. They just avoid Bakugo completely and they walk up to the bomb touching it while Ida's just kind of crippled basically on the floor. He can't continue moving. Anyways, his hero team wins. And yeah, they ask who did the best and Momo explains that it was Izuku. He took into account the mentality of one of the enemies. He then decided to opt to take a high vantage point to see if he can figure out where the bomb is without having to enter the building, making themselves known to their location. Among other things of a similar nature, Izuku overall had the best performance in that match. Obviously, all the matches continue, and it ended up being that Izuku had the best performance out of everybody just due to the way he went about the entire situation. A close second was Todoroki, but he did not surpass Izuku's intellect. And one thing they noticed is the moment Izuku got on that roof, you could almost just not even notice he was there. Like, he almost completely erased his own presence. The only reason you knew he was there is because you watched him go there. Otherwise, even All Might thinks that he wouldn't have noticed Izuku. And thinking about the way Izuku's quirk works and that one little boy he saw all those years ago, he's thinking, no, it can't be. Could it? And that's when All Might realizes that Izuku only has this woman known as Nagant as his only living family. And All Might realizes that Izuku is that boy from all those years ago that gave him the upper hand against All For One, allowing him to survive the fight. And so All Might decides to take Izuku under his wing and looks after him due to the guilt he feels about Izuku's mother, because he was looking for that young boy all these years because he was genuinely worried about him. He wondered what happened to him, and he felt guilty that he couldn't save that young boy's mother, even though that young boy ended up saving him. So the story continues with Izuku getting ready to go home when Aizawa actually goes up to Izuku and says, "You're gonna have to get this permission slip signed, Izuku, because soon enough, in a few days, we're going to the USJ, Unforeseen Simulation Joint." And so Izuku goes home and he just gets Lady Nagant to sign it because this time she's actually home. And then he goes and hangs out with Kuma for a little while. He has fun, of course, because obviously he's with his dog. And a few days pass. Things just remain pretty canonical. Nothing too different happens. That's when they're going to the USJ. And, Izuku is bored out of his mind. He doesn't like to be at nothing very often, because he's at nothing anytime he pulls out a sniper. It's like anytime he isn't sniping, he just wants to be doing stuff. So Izuku, thinking exactly that, decides to just run straight in so he's not as bored. So when he enters the USJ and everybody follows in behind him, the Hero 13 gets Izuku to come forward as she explains everything about this. You know, that boring ass speech that nobody wanted to listen to. After this, Izuku's just like, "Wait, did you get us fake villains to fight as well?" Aizawa panics and goes, "No, those are real villains," and tells all the students to get behind him. Obviously, Kurogiri pulls up, teleports everybody around. However, in this timeline, he teleports Izuku, Tsu, and Mineta all to the mountains. And Izuku, looking at where he is, he just thinks, this is perfect. He takes out his blanket that he has, because he always walks around with a camouflage blanket in a backpack. The backpack is part of his hero costume, and he puts it around himself, hiding. He takes out his gun, and he starts sniping all the villains around him specifically. Mineta and Tsuyu are both helping him, but he's not killing any of the villains. He's shooting them in the legs, the arms, stuff like that. Eventually, he clears out his area, and that's when he starts looking across the USJ. He notices there's villains at the water attacking them. He starts shooting them. He notices there's villains in the city. He notices there's villains here, and there. He wasn't able to get everybody in the city because there's just way too much cover, but he was able to help most of the students. And during this time, Izuku notices that Aizawa is getting attacked by the Nomu. While Aizawa is getting attacked by a Nomu, he also notices that Shigaraki is reaching for Aizawa. And Izuku, he just has this feeling. He thinks there's something not right here. and he snipes Shigaraki's hand before he can actually touch Aizawa. Izuku then proceeds to notice that the Nomu has Aizawa's head in his hand, and Aizawa is about to get smashed into the ground. Izuku, realizing that this is not a good situation, starts sacrificing whole handfuls of hair because he's been collecting his own hair to create stronger bullets. But even those bullets weren't able to stop the Nomu from doing what he was trying to do. And he still grabs Aizawa's head, slamming it into the ground. And Izuku is kind of frightened, but panicking. He's just like, oh no. And that's when, through all this, you hear, I am here! All Might appearing. And he immediately runs down at the Nomu to go protect Aizawa from getting killed. All Might's putting in the ones against the Nomu, but eventually Kurogiri decides he wants to intervene, and All Might gets put at a disadvantage. When All Might gets put at this disadvantage, Izuku begins to genuinely panic. He's just like, no, we can't lose All Might. And Shigaraki is going to reach for All Might, even though he has a hole through one of his hands. Izuku then shoots Shigaraki's arm. And after that, he then sacrifices 3 of his fingernails to form a strong bullet, which he then shoots straight through the Nomu, destroying over half of its body. And before it can regenerate, All Might finishes putting the once on it, sending it flying, incapacitating the Nomu. Kurogiri, realizing the situation they are currently in, decides that he will take Shigaraki and get the hell out of there before they all get arrested. That's when Tsuyu and Mineta run up to Izuku like, wow, that was so cool. And that's when they realize that his hand is bleeding profusely. His fingernails are gone, 3 of them. And they're like, no, what the hell happened, Izuku? And Izuku, not being used to the pain he's actually going through at the moment, because he never actually had to sacrifice real parts of his body, like outside of hair, Izuku kind of passes out. He's losing blood, he's in a lot of pain, and he just used a lot of his quirk to actually help everybody. He doesn't have it in him to stay awake now. And that's when Tsuyu and Mineta go and get help. They're like, help, Izuku needs help. All Might, worried about Izuku, runs straight over to him, and he notices that 3 of his fingernails are gone. And that's when All Might actually puts it together that Izuku sacrificed his fingernails to save All Might. And so, All Might immediately picked up Izuku. However, before he could do anything, he de-transformed and fell. That's when Cementos gets there just in the nick of time, blocking off All Might and Izuku. And so, after all this, all these series of events, they both wake up in the hospital, next to each other actually. And it was actually due to All Might's request. All Might requested that Izuku be put in the same room as himself. And that's when All Might talks to Izuku about one for all and all for one. Because more than the fact that he's thinking about giving Izuku the quirk, he also is thinking about the fact that he kind of owes Izuku the answer to what actually happened all those nights, because Izuku knew full well he ain't seen no chainsaw hero or nothing, or his chainsaw villain or nothing. And so, All Might then explains about One for All and everything, and tells Izuku, I want you to be my successor. Izuku is unsure of how to feel about that, because he really does want to be a hero, but he's killed people, and he doesn't know if he actually deserves the quirk. But after he goes home, he knows he can trust Lady Nagant, so he actually tells Lady Nagant about it. And that's when she's just like, you should absolutely take that quirk. It'll give you the chance to become the strongest hero, as well as give you leverage to stay away from the hero commission for the foreseeable future. Izuku, thinking about it, is genuinely happy. He's like, alright, that's what I'll do then. Next day, he goes straight to All Might and says he'll do it. All Might tells Izuku to like take off his shirt and stuff so he can make sure Izuku's body is ready for it. And Izuku's body is fit. Izuku is one fit guy. Izuku, once he gets this quirk, will be able to use at least 50% of One for All, if not more. All Might being impressed is like, yes. Also, I'm gonna want you to go with my old master for your internship during the after the UA Sports Festival. Izuku agrees for the time being, but a little bit later on, after thinking more about All Might's request, ends up saying, "Now I'll go with someone more like Edgeshot if I get the opportunity." All Might understanding is just it lets him know that he understands and just moves on with their day. So we're gonna fast forward to around the time of the UA Sports Festival. They all group up and they head out. And the event begins. You know, the obstacle race is how it truly starts. Izuku does about as well as he did in Canon. He did end up getting first place once again because he did the exact same thing Canon Izuku did. Putting all the mines together and just hitting it and going flying. However, right at the end, when everybody gets through, he just admits, I forfeit. And everybody's just like, why? The entire audience all are like complaining. The heroes are looking at him judgmentally. And Izuku is explaining. He's like, look, I'm not going to be able to do anything crazy in the cavalry battle. And once we go to the 1v1s, I won't be able to do anything at all. Truthfully, I didn't really want to participate in this to begin with, because I don't really want my quirk out there like that. So, in the bottom line of logic here, I don't want to finish this entire event. The audience is still complaining, but the heroes are more understanding. They're understanding that he understands his own limits and that his quirk being more secret is probably a better thing than every villain knowing exactly how to counter him. So Izuku then goes home instead of staying and watching the rest of it, because he is kind of saddened by the fact that he couldn't participate, but he wasn't confident enough to use One for All. Though he is beginning to understand it, he's using around like 10% whenever he like tries to punch and stuff, because he's not trying to hurt himself, and he understands the idea of not overcooking an egg, for example. So after all this, all their internship requests come through. Izuku does get the one from Gran Torino due to All Might's request regardless. However, he sees an intern request from Edgeshot, and he wonders, why would Edgeshot want me to intern with him? And that's when he agrees to go to Edgeshot's, and he emails him before he goes, actually, asking why he sent him an internship. Edgeshot just points out the fact that he knows about what happened at the USJ and that he's more of a stealthy hero, and believes that he could probably learn more physical ways of fighting with weapons such as swords, kunai, things along those lines. He thinks ninja weapons would actually be a pretty good option for someone like Izuku. Izuku, liking the idea of using something like a sword in close range combat, decides that, yeah, no, I'm definitely interested. So he goes with Edgeshot, and they're really just training most of this time. But Izuku is such a fast learner, Edgeshot is confused almost. It's just straight in awe of Izuku's talent. And so Edgeshot, only after 5 days, not even the full week, gives Izuku his very own sword. It goes on Izuku's back, right underneath his backpack, so he can wield it at any point he needs. Edgeshot then tells Izuku that they're going to go to Hosu City and do a little bit of patrolling for the next couple of days. And so they do. Izuku ends up stumbling upon Ida about to get stabbed in the back, not due to him realizing Ida was about to do something stupid or anything along those lines, because he left early, so he didn't notice the change in Ida right away, or why. Moving around Hosu, and that's when he actually spots Ida and Stain right above him. That's when Izuku notices Stain's sword piercing through Ida's back, killing Ida almost instantly. And Izuku basically screams at Stain and just dives straight for him. Stain is still more proficient than Izuku is with the blade, so Izuku is at a very large disadvantage. But luckily for Izuku didn't just go out alone either, and he didn't really dip on his hero internship. Ed's shot wasn't very far, so when he heard Izuku scream, he ran as fast as he could to get over there, and that's when he notices Stain standing above the lifeless corpse of one of Izuku's classmates. And so Ed's shot then incapacitates Stain without much difficulty, and the internships all end early. School doesn't start back up for about 2 weeks due to Ida's death, and the press was going ham on UA. But even Ida's parents, as well as his older brother who can't hero anymore, as much as they're saddened by Ida's death, they explain that it's not UA's fault, it's Ida's. Ida went on his internship, abandoned his internship, went looking for Stain, and when he came across him, he lost. And so, at the end of the day, there wasn't anything UA could have done. Manuel, the hero Ida was interning with, fell into a deep depression afterwards. And the Ingenium family just never really recovered. After all this really sad series of events, Izuku has made a vow to himself that he won't let any more of his friends get hurt like that. No one else will die on his watch. No one that he cares about, at least. And so he starts going ham into training for the next several weeks that he's not at school. He gets Lady Nagant to train with him more. And when he isn't training with Lady Nagant, he's training with All Might. He's getting more proficient with One for All. And once school starts back up, the first thing they do is actually do the exams. Obviously, there's a week of studying and stuff, but they're doing exams to see if the students are ready for anything. The exams happen, nothing really crazy. Izuku is still not competing with All Might, and neither is Bakugo. So they end up escaping in about the same way. That's when we get to the Forest Training Camp. At the Forest Training Camp, Izuku is trying to learn how to perhaps infuse One for All into his sword, because he realizes that most blades will just break if you put too much power into it. So he's thinking that maybe with a certain amount of One for All and seeing how much he can actually infuse into the blade. And so for the next few days, they train really hard. Izuku isn't really annoyed by Koda or anything, but doesn't try super hard either. However, there's one night where he notices there's something off. Things are too quiet. The forest is supposed to make noise. Things hunters all know. And that's when he notices things are getting dangerous. You see big blue flames appear. And Izuku, even though he didn't really care that much about Koda, he always kept an eye on him because obviously he's a child. He didn't want the kid to get hurt or nothing. So he immediately goes to where Koda should be. That's when he sees Muscular standing over Koda. Izuku then pulls up his gun. And he realizes, can I penetrate him with just the hair? He opts to just give it a shot. He shoots one bullet. It does pierce into Muscular, but it doesn't go very deep. And it just kind of spits back out of his body. Izuku is thinking, God damn it, this is not good. So then he takes out his sword, which he then starts wielding to fight Muscular. Though, the more he cuts Muscular, the muscles are just very strong and they're starting to crack the blade a bit. Izuku then puts his sword away and he's just thinking, what to do. So he opts to use 100% of One for All. He starts punching Muscular at full force. And this is breaking his arms. Not as bad as Canon Izuku because Izuku physically is able to wield like 60%, though he's not really comfortable going that high yet. So he's just punching Muscular, repeat full force, full force, full force, full force, full force. Eventually, Muscular does get the upper hand on Izuku, and then the cannon shit happens. Izuku gets back up and punches him straight into the wall, knocking him out. Izuku's arms are broken for sure, but Izuku's not one who will be stopped just by some broken arms either. He picks up his rifle and tells Koda to follow him. He then goes to like the schooling building and drops off Koda to Aizawa, and Muscular has said the same things he has said in canon. And that's when Izuku mentions to Aizawa that they're after Bakugo. They saw the way he acted at the sports festival and think he can become a villain. From what I've seen, Bakugo is very hot-headed, but he won't fall for it, and that's what worries me the most. What happens if he refuses to become a villain? So, Izuku goes after them. Aizawa tells Izuku to wait and come back because Izuku's arms are broken. They're low-key destroyed. But Izuku just doesn't care. He wants to protect his friends, especially after Iida's death. Izuku goes back on the mountain where he had found Koda, and he gets in position. He puts his blanket over himself, and he starts taking shots. Bakugo and Todoroki were having problems with Moonfish, I think his name is. Izuku takes him out, shooting him straight through his mouth. Now, he didn't kill Moonfish, he aimed perfectly. It pierced straight through one cheek and out the other, destroying all of Moonfish's teeth at once. Moonfish can't use his quirk right now. Like, his teeth were getting destroyed, but when the base gets destroyed, they can't be used anymore. I don't know if that's actually true, but I'm gonna run with that. And so, after that, Izuku then notices this guy. He's starting to release smoke. He shoots him in the legs. He can't move anymore. So the metal guy and Big Hands didn't have nearly as much trouble as in canon. Then he notices Dabi, and twice he shoots twice in the leg as well as shooting at Dabi, but Dabi had gotten out of the way in time. And that's when he notices Bakugo is going back. And then there's a man. And Bakugo just disappears and the man runs off. Izuku is thinking, nah, I can't allow this. So he aims perfectly, shoots at Mr. Compress, which does hit his arm, but Mr. Compress just keeps going. He doesn't get stopped. Izuku does not have enough time to get another shot off before they get away. And Izuku throws his rifle to the ground and screams, "God damn it." And that's when he makes it back to the teachers. And they're telling him, "Izuku, you gotta go to the hospital. Your arms are destroyed." Izuku's just like, "Hospitals don't matter right now. We need to go get Bakugo." Aizawa's just like, "Yeah, we do. But that's a job for heroes. Students shouldn't have to worry about this." Izuku starts screaming that he can't lose another friend. And Aizawa, understanding Izuku's sentiment, tries to comfort Izuku. Izuku just isn't really having it, so he just goes off and sits down, hoping that he can calm down at least a little bit. Eventually, he makes his way to a hospital where he gets his arms healed. Much better than canon Izuku because they were nowhere near as damaged. However, after getting his arms healed, the first thing he does is begin investigating. Due to the way the Hero Commission was training Izuku, they decided they wanted to try and investigate and teach him how to investigate so they don't need to do all the investigations for every single one of his assassination missions. So he starts moving quick. He starts tracking the League of Villains sightings. He starts looking around the town, seeing any sort of off things. And that's when he eventually comes across a bar. And he watches that bar for a full 8 hours. And that's when he sees Toga walking out. And he's just like, "I think I might have spotted her there." No. this is it then. But as he's getting ready to storm the place by himself foolishly, that's when you see All Might and them appear right there. And as All Might arrives there and gets Bakugo out, that's when you hear a big explosion. And Izuku just goes towards that direction, looking to see what happens, see if he can help anybody. And that's when he sees it. That's when he sees him. All for One. All for One is floating there above Mount Lady, best genist in them. And Izuku's just like, no, not again. And even though Izuku wanted to help fight All for One, Izuku was not really that focused on helping them win against him. He prioritized with every fiber of his being getting people out of there. He doesn't want anybody to have to go through what he did. So the entire time, he's just jumping in and out, in and out, in and out, in and out, getting people out. Just evacuating and evacuating and evacuating. And eventually, All Might appears and starts fighting All for One. Izuku takes a sideline because he had thought everybody was evacuated. But that's when he realizes, no, there's still one woman. And that's when All for One realizes as well. So trying to take advantage of this situation, All for One is going to send one more blast at All Might. Izuku, as fast as he can, tries to get to the woman so All Might doesn't have to worry about her. But he wasn't able to get there in time. So All Might ended up taking the blow and losing his form, going into Small Might. Izuku, then getting the woman out of the way, apologizes to All Might for not being able to get her out of the way in time. All Might just looks at Izuku and gives him a thumbs up. All for One and All Might's fight continues much like canon, where All Might ends up winning with one last blow. And at the end of the battle, you know it, he put his fist up before he collapses. And he ends up getting back up off the ground just for another couple minutes. And that's when he points to the camera that Izuku's watching a TV on. It says, "You're next." Now, of course, like in canon, most of the world believed that he was talking about the next generations of heroes. It's their time. But Izuku knew he meant much more than that. As well as Bakugo, who's keeping an eye on Izuku. Izuku, who's normally perfectly composed. He notices something flash across his face. Sadness. Bakugo, realizing this sadness, realizes there's something deeper to what All Might just said. And that he wants to know it. Because everybody views Izuku as the strongest and the most proficient in the class, when really, it should be Bakugo. But Bakugo doesn't have hatred for Izuku, he just thinks he's better than him. And wants to understand what the hell is going on. Alas, Izuku just goes home for the night. I just realized that I had accidentally skipped the forest training, but you know what? Screw it. We don't need that shit here. Anyways, let us continue. Izuku goes home for the night, and he lays there in bed, just looking up at the ceiling, debating. He's just like, what am I to do now? The symbol of peace has fallen. And Izuku feels a couple tears stream down his face. And that's when he puts his arm over his eyes to stop the tears. Izuku just thinks to himself, I'm next. I don't know what to do. And even in his mind, he's stuttering the same way I am telling the story. Izuku, he just realizes how big the shoes he has to fill truly are. The next morning, Izuku goes to school, and you could tell that something's been up with him. Bakugo genuinely wants to know what happened. And so Bakugo tells Izuku, meet me outside the dorms at training site A at 9 o'clock tonight. All Might comes in a little bit later and realizes that there's something off about Izuku. All Might, thinking about it, realizes that it's probably because of all the pressure that is now on Izuku's shoulder as the successor of One for All. Izuku has so much more to live up to than he did previously, and he doesn't have much of a choice either. Izuku just... He feels overwhelmed. All Might, understanding that this has got to be overwhelming for Izuku, after classes, takes Izuku to the side and just tells Izuku that if Izuku doesn't want to be, he doesn't need to be the symbol of peace. It's not Izuku's job to become that. As much as he gave his quirk to Izuku, the quirk is truly meant just to defeat All for One. Now that All for One has been defeated, Izuku doesn't really have to worry about it. Izuku doesn't really get any calmness, any relief from what All Might was saying to him. He just kind of looks at All Might, just like, that's not an option. Because since you became the symbol of peace, the crime rate, everything has gone down so far. And without one, it's just going to start going straight back up. Izuku's right, of course, and All Might knows it, but All Might doesn't want Izuku to have that kind of pressure on his shoulders. Izuku is just overwhelmed because nothing has truly ever been properly expected of him in the same way this is expected of him. It's not expected by All Might or anybody else, but by himself. And the worst thing is you can't let yourself down. Izuku then, goes back to his room in the dorms after school and just kind of lies there. And then 9 o'clock comes. Izuku goes out to the training site and Bakugo confronts him. He calls Izuku out. He's just like, something's off. Like, I get your All Might's probably disciple, but there's something more to it, isn't there? And Izuku, looking at Bakugo, even though they weren't close or anything, to Izuku, he doesn't really have anybody else to confide in. He can't tell All Might that this power was too much for him or anything of that sort, so instead he lets it all out. He yells at Bakugo, crying while he's doing it, that he doesn't know what to do. All Might made him his successor, and he doesn't have the mental capacity to pick up such a large torch. And Izuku calls out the fact that for Christ's sake, he's 15 years old. He's 15 years old with the weight of the literal fucking world on his shoulders. And Bakugo, just listening to all this, is stunned. It's not the same as in canon because Bakugo doesn't have that dynamic with Izuku. Bakugo just kind of stood there stunned while Izuku is there crying. And Bakugo just decides that, honestly, the best course of action may very well be to provoke Izuku. So Bakugo is just like, yeah, you're supposed to be this perfect hero, aren't you? And starts saying wild things to Izuku, provoking him, making him more upset. And Bakugo tells Izuku, and this is the last straw, that Izuku isn't going to be anything, no matter how hard he tries. And that just kind of sets Izuku off, and a full-on brawl starts between the two. Bakugo with his explosions, Izuku using parts of One for All. And it goes on for probably about 30 minutes. That's because when Aizawa came running out for this, All Might said you can still punish them, but I think this needs to happen. But he stopped Aizawa from intervening into the fight. Let it finish, and Aizawa then confronts them, blah blah blah. But Izuku feels 10 times better than he did earlier. And Bakugo is glad to see, like, part of that weight is lifted off his shoulders. Because as much as Bakugo is a bit of a twat, he's not a terrible person. Like, if it's a classmate, he wouldn't want to see his classmate distraught in the same way Izuku is here. So, Bakugo did it in the only way he knew how. And after all that, they had their chores and everything they had to do for the next couple of weeks. Eventually, things remain fairly canonical after this point. The Overhaul thing. Overhaul has a much harder time because Izuku just kind of has a better handle on One for All. He's not late this time. Mirio doesn't lose his quirk. Eri is saved. Why did I stop this? So, like, there's probably only like 15 minutes to part 2. Because there's not a whole lot. Everything remains fairly canonical. They destroy Dr. Ujiko's laboratory. Izuku's just kind of there. All the way up until, honestly, nothing crazy really happens until probably, like, a final battle. But even that doesn't really happen. The prison's broken into. All Might still gets his speech from Stain. Like, everything's going to the shitter. But Izuku comes across All For One earlier than was planned. And All For One doesn't have danger sense. So Izuku just took his high point, aimed his sniper, took him out. I'm gonna be so dead ass. Like, the thing is, it's hard to not just destroy with someone like Izuku, who's supposed to be like almost a cold-blooded person. Izuku being more calm and being able to use a sniper and stuff. If he finds All For One, which he probably can due to his skill at hunting and stuff, he would just snipe him. And then there's just Shigaraki, who Izuku honestly has no real problem with. Because Shigaraki still needs to make contact with, like, the ground, I believe. And he hasn't fully awakened the same way he had when Bakugo had basically died. So I'd just say Izuku just sacrifices his gallbladder and shoots at him, killing him. I don't know if I already used the gallbladder, but I'm sorry this is kind of a half-assed, part 2. It's been a month since I recorded part 1, and I cannot remember shit. I just remember where I left off because I watched the last 3 minutes of the video. I could probably do more had I rewatched the entire thing, but I want to move on to newer projects. I'll probably redo this at some point. But, yeah, that's it for this. I appreciate you all. Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe, and I'll see you all next time. Peace.